You've probably noticed podcasts sprouting out like weeds out of the ground. This guy is the original. 10 million subscribers, 1 million views per day, over $150 million earned. How does someone who titles their videos the exact opposite of clickbait achieve this? There are 3 secrets. The first one is authenticity. In a world full of scripted interviews, we are at the point in time where there is a shift happening. In fact, the shift happened a long time ago and we are in the middle of the consequences of it. That shift is that people are tired of scripted media. People have always been tired of scripted media, but it was the only thing available to us. Joe Rogan's podcast style allows the viewer to be a fly on the wall of a real conversation of someone you find interesting. Talk shows were designed to show celebrities in a relaxed setting where they can be themselves, but they still had an element of scripting to them. Rogan's podcast is successful because it goes one step further and eliminates that element. The result is the closest thing to a real conversation, and that's why we enjoy it. This hasn't happened before in human history. Even in early television, there's usually either an audience present or it's scripted. It's weird of me to make this video after Joe Rogan made the move to Spotify. However, there are plenty of gold nuggets we can learn from his rise on YouTube because it's where the majority of his growth came from. So everything I mentioned in this video refers to his growth on YouTube. With Rogan's podcast, you get to see the full thing, not what some producer wanted you to see. There are no cuts, breaks, or hidden footage. You get to make up your own mind about someone or something. It's such a refreshing contrast to traditional media that it's a wonder it took Rogan this long to be such a sensation. The style of the podcast and Rogan's approach results in guests opening up more than they would in a normal TV interview. Where else would one of the richest businessmen in the world take a hit of marijuana and talk candidly about the future of his businesses? Therefore, this results in the viewer feeling that a JRE episode is exclusive. The visiting person will most likely be as open as they ever will be in any interview, and considering we watch interviews to see how people really are, JRE does it better than anyone else. This compels people to click. Beating the YouTube algorithm isn't always about making one killer video. Sure, that can happen, but it's not necessarily a good thing. Having a good channel is much better than having one great video because it means you'll have an actual audience and not be just a one-hit wonder with a dead channel. Making a good channel is about understanding what your audience genuinely wants and what they're currently getting. If there's a disconnect here, then there's a huge opportunity. This is the most important thing an aspiring YouTuber needs to think about, and it will be the determining factor whether your channel is a success or failure. This can be done for any genre. Joe Rogan's podcast is just an example. The second JRE secret is variety. What brings an astrophysicist, comedian, UFC fighter, scientist, athletes, Alex Jones, and the CEO of Tesla together? The JRE podcast. There's something for everyone. Whoever you are, chances are that you have stumbled upon a person you find interesting on JRE. When you clicked and watched, you were intrigued by the authentic style and how it is so different to other interviews. This put JRE on your radar and it became a preference for you next time if you were to see it. If Rogan were to limit his podcast to only UFC fighters and comedians, since that's what he was most involved with in his life, the podcast wouldn't be close to what it is today. His strategic decision of interviewing anyone and everyone paid off in a big way because it broadened the exposure of his podcast. Now, this does require some nuance. The worst thing to be on YouTube is a jack of all trades. Anyone who appeals to everyone most likely appeals to no one. At the start, Rogan's podcast had no variety. The guests were just comedians and then people involved with the UFC. This was his little niche. But over time, the guests evolved as Rogan noted who the listeners were responding to and as his access became greater. The takeaway here is that it's important to have a small niche focus at the start. Then let the audience decide for you where you take your YouTube channel. The third JRE secret is watch time. JRE videos are not clickbait. They're the opposite of clickbait. So how do they do so well? Because the YouTube algorithm prioritizes watch time just as much as it does factors like CTR, JRE benefits from the longer style videos. It wasn't always like this. Earlier versions of the algorithm did not prioritize watch time as much as recent updates. In 2012, the algorithm underwent a change that resulted in rewarding videos for holding people's attention. This is when watch time became important. Long-form interview styles benefited greatly from this change because one view can result in hours of watch time. This means that one view of a JRE episode could be worth more watch time than 50 views of a competing short video. Therefore, when the YouTube algorithm is attempting to decide what video to recommend, a long-form video that actually held people's attention will have a substantial advantage over short videos that held people's attention because of the drastic watch time difference. Don't just make your videos long without them needing to be though. That'll just alienate your viewers. Rather, decide what makes sense for your audience, and if it happens to be longer videos, then don't be afraid to follow that. I want to end this video by saying that moving to Spotify isn't a good thing for the JRE podcast. 100 million million is a lot of money, so this might be a good thing for Joe Rogan himself. But specifically for the podcast, it isn't a good thing. There are viewers that aren't watching anymore, and there are those that do but are unsatisfied with Spotify. As much as people like to discredit YouTube sometimes, it clearly is the best at what it does, and that won't be changing anytime soon. If you're a creator, then now is the absolute best time to start taking YouTube seriously, because there hasn't been a better time to make a living off of YouTube than right now. YouTube has perfected their craft. It's time to perfect yours.